Let's head to Tanzania now, where the central bank has revoked the licenses of 5 critically undercapitalized community banks, and that's to protect its financial stability in, of course, East Africa's #3 economy. There are about 40 commercial banks and a dozen community banks, which target savings from specific communities or sectors such as farming. The financial sector is, however, dominated by just a handful of big banks. The central bank said it will liquidate the Covenant Bank for Women, the Efatha Bank, Njombe Community Bank, Kagera Farmers Cooperative Bank, and Mary Community Bank. Now, this brings to 8 the number of banks whose business licenses have been cancelled since 2017. Of course, analysts are saying a steep increase in bad loans, coupled with a sharp decline in credit to the private sector, are threatening to undermine economic growth. Well, our Tanzania reporter, Daniel Kijo, joins me live in the studio with more. Daniel is always welcome to the show. And
thank you, Uche.
Welcome to the show in the studio for the first time. Well, let's talk about Tanzania's financial sector. What really is the scenario on ground? As we heard there, the central bank has stepped in. But how bad is the situation?
It's not as bad as it seems. I think what the central bank is trying to do is basically enforce the law. And the Banks and Financial Institutions Act of 2016 clearly requires banks to have a minimum of 2 billion Tanzanian shillings, something like $2 million as capital backed up in the bank. So banks that are not meeting the standards are facing the BOT's harsh hand. And these are banks that are severely undercapitalized and a risk to depositors and also the financial situations. Main reasons, as you said, are non-performing NPLs, non-performing loans, bad debts. So I think what the central bank is doing is just tightening on the bank law that of 2000.
So it certainly looks like Tanzania's banking sector is heading towards consolidation in the new year. We're going to see the number of banks continue to come down.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. I think it would again depend on those banks that follow the law. So if they do follow the law, the Banking and Financial Institutions Act of 2006, they should do business. If not, as we've seen, the bank is not easy on them.
Yeah. And of course, this all comes from President Magufuli, who has been quite tough in his stance on corruption, reckless public spending. So what exactly have been the positive aspects of his crusade? Because he has been criticized quite a lot for this tough stance.
There have been positives. He has led by example. We have seen a lot of reductions from 2015 in sort of flights. He has not taken a lot of international flights himself personally, a lot of cutting on spending of these foreign trips that government officials used to take. There have been a lot of cutting on sort of conferences and foreign mission to other countries. And there were times where government officials would do national agenda meetings in other countries. He has said a no to that. He also reduced, under his regime and cracking down on corruption and sort of bad management, he has reduced 10,000 ghost workers that were just being paid, and this was money that the government was spending on. He also fired 9,900 plus public servants who had fake IDs. And his mindset of cost cutting has spread across not just the central bank, even the local governments. You see district officers cutting costs in their own budgets as well. And it's even gone further to the private sector. We've seen since 2015 a lot of spending from big companies like telcos, a lot of cost cutting, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a mindset shift that I think is affecting the whole country now.
And of course, we saw him also targeting the mining sector last year. But very quickly, are Tanzanians happy with what he's doing?
I think that's a challenging question. Some are happy. Obviously, big businesses have responded with a bit of a shock with his new style of doing things. But I think in general, the majority of Tanzania, the 80% who are low-income earners, are very happy with him.
Now, with all these changes, drastic changes he's putting in place, with all these reforms, what are some of the key areas we should be looking at in terms of the economy in the next year?
The World Bank Tanzania Economic Review says that, the one that released end of 2017 anticipates that the economy will grow by 6.2% from 2017 to 2016. Heavy investment in rail, port and road, the main drivers for this GDP growth. People are excited to see the mining sector. You touched on that as well. What will happen in 2018? We've seen 2016 with the new policy changes, and how will now the mining sector stabilize or balance? We've seen tourism do very well towards the end of 2017. In fact, Ngorongoro and Serengeti, which are one of the biggest touristic attractions in Tanzania, were flooded with tourists in finishing 2017. So that has always been a strong sector for Tanzania. But again, the banking sector is critical to any economic growth. So experts are waiting to see how the banking sector itself will stabilize in the coming year.
And of course, regional integration is going to be a big item, a topic in this coming year. East African community, there's been a little bit of friction. A lot of people are looking to see what Magufuli's moves are going to be in terms of integrating Tanzania with the rest of East Africa. Last year, we heard Kenya's president announce that the East African will now be allowed, every East African will now be allowed to live and invest in Kenya without restrictions. How are we going to see President Magufuli and Tanzania respond to that?
As you know, Kenya and Tanzania have enjoyed very deep economic and cultural relationships for many years. The news when the Kenyan president announced what you just said, it was received positively by many Tanzanians, including myself. But we are yet to hear a clear, sort of as outspoken response from President Magufuli. So that is one that we're waiting to see in 2018. Maybe we will hear him open up on this.
Does he look positive about integration going forward?
That's
hard.
That's a wait and see. Definitely.
Well, many thanks for joining us in the studio. Of course, that's our Tanzanian correspondent, Daniel Kijer.